think there's three reasons why today is really important for me. One, I'm having my first child in a month. Actually, today my wife is having her, I was going to say bachelorette party, but that's wrong.
What?
So she's having her baby shower as I speak.
Bachelorette party.
Totally frightening. Two, and I'll talk a little bit about Fatherly, which is our new parenting site we've just launched, and taking a basic traditional parenting sites, which are all focused on women. They're pink, purple, and turquoise. There's 4.2 million mom blogs out there, and really very few resources for dads. And as trends are changing, we're trying to fill that need and that gap. The first call I made was to Matt and Lance and to Sally to say, hey, we have this idea. What do you guys think, and how can you guys help us work on that? That was a year and a half ago. And now things have sort of grown and scaled, and it's really thanks to you, thanks to the 92Y, and what you guys are doing here is absolutely incredible. And then the third reason why I'm very excited to talk specifically to you, Stu, is the thing that I wrestle with as a serial entrepreneur, as somebody who loves what he does, who loves working, and is just beyond excited about parenting, is exploring my own personal fears around work-life balance and integration, and being present both to my career, to my wife, to myself, and of course to this child. So I'm really excited, and Sue, thanks. I thought maybe first what we could do is sort of talk a little bit about your work at Wharton with the Work-Life Integration Project, okay. And then maybe we'll start there, and sort of if you can give us a little bit of an overview of all the things that you guys have been working on and how that's come to be.
Well, it's been 25 or so years, and nothing like this was happening at that time, I can assure you. Well, my first child was born in 1987, and like many of you, it was a transformative experience for me, and I had a unique opportunity to talk about what the transformation in my consciousness meant to students at Wharton. So, my consuming thought was, well, now I have to make the world a safe one for Gabriel to grow up in, which was something I hadn't really thought much about prior to actually meeting him for the first time. But could not stop thinking about once I did meet him. And so a week or so later, when I go back into the Wharton classroom in a class on managing people at work or something, the students had prepared a case on reward systems and motivation. And I said, we're not going to talk about that today. There's something else that I really think we need to talk about. And I just ranted really about why I thought it was very important for them to be thinking as future business leaders and as people who might have some responsibility for the next generation, not just of talent but of people. What's this going to be like for you? What are you going to do personally? What kind of organizations are you going to help to cultivate that help parents nurture children? And I remember vividly that conversation because half the room, men and women, were quite upset with me. I mean, first, they had prepared their case, the night before, and I was just putting that aside and like, hey, I studied and all that. But much more importantly, there were many people thinking, well, first of all, Professor, nobody really cares about your kids, so like, why are you bothering to talk to us about that? But it was inappropriate for other reasons. We're in business school here. Why are we talking about families? I don't get it. That's not why I came to business school. What are you doing? How is this relevant? Of course, others in the room were quite eager to, and were grateful that I had raised this question. What does this mean for you? What are you going to do? And they just leaned forward and kept, asking me more questions. You're the professor. You tell us. What are we supposed to do? Of course, I had no idea. I had some idea. I had been studying leadership development, but also had done research on role theory as a graduate student at the University of Michigan. And prior to that, was in the mental health field. It was a burgeoning clinical psychologist before I became an organizational psychologist. So I started asking these questions of colleagues, of people in business who were just starting to ask these questions in a systematic way. And that conversation with my students really changed everything as I started to now focus my research on, all right, what is it that people do who do this well, who bring together the different parts of their lives in a way that works for all the different parts? And what can we learn about the changing values and beliefs and attitudes that men and women have about their work and family lives from studying them? So we began a longitudinal study over 20 years ago, and we've been continuing to research the attitudes and values of Wharton students and alumni as they've evolved, and developed a set of practices based on field research where we looked at this question of who does this well and what do they do. And I started teaching what these skills were that we were discovering. And then in the late 90s was asked by Ford Motor Company to join them as the head of leadership development for Ford Motor Company. So my wife and I lived as very poor graduate students in the early 80s in an 800 square foot little cottage in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But now, 15 years later, I went back as a fat cat senior executive, reporting to an officer of the Ford Motor Company, and created a couple of programs there, including one that merged what we were learning about how people learn leadership with how they bring together the different parts of their lives for mutual gain, and called it total leadership, which is really about leading from the point of view of the whole person. And it was radically successful there, as people felt quite liberated in doing what it was that we discovered you need to do, which is to know what matters to you, to be real, to act with authenticity by clarifying what's important to you, to be whole by recognizing and respecting the whole person and knowing who matters to you and why they do in the different parts of your life, your work, your home, your community. And then to be innovative by continually experimenting with new ways of getting things done. And so we did that work, and we set people on a path to discovery through experimentation about new ways that they could bring together the different parts of their lives in a way that worked for all of them. What we ended up calling four-way wins, things that you can do that have a demonstrably positive impact on your work, your home, your community, and yourself. And I came back to Wharton and started teaching this in a course there, wrote some books about it. Last year initiated a MOOC on Coursera.
Massive open online course.
Thank you, Simon. He just learned that this morning. Right? And Coursera is one of the big platforms. We have 100,000 students around the world who are studying this 10-week course, the next iteration of which is February 8th. You should sign up, take this class.
At totalleadership.com?
Well, no, it's at just Coursera. It's called Better Leader, Richer Life. So that's probably more than you wanted to hear the details of. But what's so amazing sitting here and looking at this group of mostly men, I've been doing a lot of talking over the last 25 years at conferences, and from the very beginning through to now, it's mostly women, right? Susan and I have been at many of these conferences, and it's usually me and a couple other guys. So this is amazing for me to, 25 years down the road, to be in a group of mainly men talking about these questions. It's the first time this has happened to me. So that says so much to me about how much we are, changed from where, I began on this journey, almost 3 decades ago now, and gives me so much hope. I'm so optimistic about the future and the kinds of knowledge that Michael and others sharing about how to make it work in ways that work for both men and women as both breadwinners and caregivers. It's profoundly inspiring. So I'm so happy to be here.
So there's a lot of language. There's work-life balance. There's work-life integration. There's total leadership. There's all these different ways that we talk about this. Do those things matter? What's the difference? Is balance? Did you choose integration because balance is not a real thing?
Balance is a bad idea. Balance is a bad word. Balance is stupid because it's impossible. You just can't. I don't know anybody who has work-life balance. Do you? So the idea of having the scales in balance. The problem, of course, when you think in terms of the scales in balance, is that your work is going well and you're getting more power, more responsibility, more authority in the world, more respect. And then, what's wrong with this picture? This is the balance picture. What's wrong with this picture? Your life is, something's wrong. So when you think in terms of balance, you naturally think in terms of trade-offs. You naturally think in terms of what you have to give up in order to get something in the other part of your life, which of course, sacrifice is necessary. Of course, you can't have it all at the same time. That too is impossible. But over the course of a life, one certainly can have a lot. And that's, I think, what we're all here to try to discover. So the problem with the work-life balance metaphor is that it forces you to think in terms of what you have to give up to get something in the other parts of your life. And what I have seen in now almost 3 decades of research and practice and teaching around the world, and these issues play out in very much the same ways in Asia and in South America and in Europe, different cultural contexts, but a lot of the dynamics are the same. If you think in terms instead of what is it that I need to do to bring together the different parts in a way that works for me and the people who matter most to me at work and at home and in the community, you come up with ways of finding a greater sense of harmony over the course of time that can be quite liberating when you think of it in those terms. So the metaphor I prefer is of a jazz quartet. In a jazz quartet, sometimes you only hear the trumpet. Sometimes you just hear the bass and the drums. Sometimes all the instruments are playing at the same volume together, but not always. So having everything all at once come together to make beautiful music, it's a rare thing. It's more in terms of the scope of one's life that you can think instead, I think, intelligently about how you're going to make investments in the different parts of your life that are going to bring value to you and to your world. And so many more people are thinking in those terms now that I think it's a more hopeful world than the one where when I first started doing this work almost 30 years ago, I had senior faculty saying to me, Stu, like, what the heck are you doing getting into this women's research field that, you have a promising career here in this leadership research, and what is your problem? I was dissuaded, rigorously dissuaded by the old guys in my department. Thank God I didn't listen to them.
So, the big challenge, and it's Sunday, so probably in the Sunday style section there'll be an article about work-life balance and an article about the new fatherhood, because that seems to be what's on everybody's mind right now.
It is amazing.
For me personally, it seems that in part work-life balance is in the news and in the conversation in part because of technology and how we're wrestling with technology. I, for one, am addicted to my screen or screens, and the work that I do. And as I prepare for fatherhood, I'm freaked out of lack of presence, and that I will be hanging out with my kid and my phone will be there, or at least I'll be thinking about that project or that email that I need to send or that email that I should not have sent. What has the research shown, or how have you guys explored technology in our life and the sort of the double-edged sword? Because at the same time, I can be home and there's the new drop cam technology that I can see what's going on in the baby's crib, from my home office or from our office. So it seems like technology has a great opportunity for integration as well.
Well, what the digital revolution has, of course, changed everything for all of us. And I think an important principle to think about is the distinction between psychological presence and physical presence. Because you can be psychologically absent and physically present. Right? What did I just say? You were listening. What did I just say?
Psychologically present, absent but physically present.
Right, and clearly not everybody in this room is psychologically present, and yet they're physically here. So, right? Hold on, let me just check. So what's your reaction to when I do that?
Dick.
Dick. It's a dick move. Why is that a dick move for me to pull out my, sorry?
They want to quote you, Stu. Why fathers matter?
Oh, so I should be interacting with the broader community instead of you people here in this room. Is that what you're saying? No.
I don't need to hear you. I'm just gonna.
You can just. Well, I think so. The key idea for all of us, and it's something that my generation is having to learn, and I suppose you are too, because not many people in this room grew up with smartphones, right? Some of you might have, I suppose, but most of you not, right? It's a new technology, and of course, the technological revolutions over the course of history, they precede the knowledge, the psychological sophistication and sociological wisdom that enables people to use these tools to positive effect in society as opposed to destructive effect. So we're all just learning this. And I think it's useful to keep in mind that we're in our infancy in figuring out how to leverage the power of these tools, which enable us to be connected and to broadcast in ways that we couldn't imagine even 10 years ago, with the dangers of the intrusion, the psychological interference that they can create when you're physically present. So what this boils down to is when you're with people who matter to you, like your 5-year-old, when you're on your cell phone, she knows it, and she knows the feeling. She knows it's a dick move, and she may not be able to say it, in a way that's really articulate, but she's probably hurt and she's probably angry that you're not paying attention to her because she knows it. So I think that's the big one, and that's the one that I have so many regrets about. As I think about when my daughter was 5, she's 21 now. She's my youngest. There were times when she'd be with me and she'd want my attention, and I'd be doing something that ultimately wasn't all that important, like reading some paper or something. And I just wish that I had spent more of those occasions especially when she was coming to me, because now, of course, to get her attention is a very, very difficult thing. That I had responded and that I had just put that, whatever it was I was doing. This is pre-cell phones, but still the same idea. And so if you struggle with this, with your addiction to the digital stream, which so many people are now suffering with, the idea of small experiments. So it's the model that my course and books really focus on is the idea of small wins. So try something that you can control, that doesn't have a lot of need for other people to give you permission, and just try a small experiment where you, for example, one of the 9 different kinds of experiments we write about in the Total Leadership book is called focusing and concentrating. Take 15 minutes in a week to just consciously and deliberately devote that 15 minutes to non-digital, just being with the person you're with, and just see what happens if you're a 24/7, 365 addicted person, and you want to try something, just take a small step and see what happens when you are consciously focusing on just that one person with no other distractions, and learn from what did it take to make that happen? How did she benefit? How did I benefit? How does that affect my work? Where I'm less distracted now because I'm taking care of a person who matters to me in the other parts of my life, so I don't have to worry about that when I'm trying to do some other work task. Does that answer the question?
Totally.
It's a lot more than.
And it just made me think of if you want to fight fire with fire, there is actually an app. I kid you not, made by UNICEF.
By who?
UNICEF, because
right.
they are there for all children, I guess. And it turns your phone off for a certain amount of time, so you can't access any other apps or anything else if you really need that support.
Yeah, a lot of companies. This is in Germany. There's an experiment, for example, with a number of companies where they're like taking your smartphone access away on the weekends. I don't think that's a good idea. Why do I think it's a bad idea? Because it takes control from the individual. I want to be able to determine when I can use my machine and do my work, and when. I don't want somebody else telling me to do that. Now, the benefit of it, I think, and we may need some of this on a social policy level, is to say to the world, look, you do need a Sabbath. You do need to rest. You do need to shut it off. There's a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of rabbis actually about the concept of a Sabbath in the modern world, when, does Saturday still make sense for that, and why?
Since you mentioned rabbis,
yes.
One of the things that we had talked about earlier is work-life balance is now there is this spirituality element to what you're doing. There's this emotional intelligence element to what you're doing. I'm interested to sort of see how is that received from hardcore business students at Wharton? Is this and with the employers that you're working with, is that something that they are opening up to?
There's such a hunger for this kind of content now. I mean, I had to fight to get any of this content in anywhere in the Wharton curriculum, 20 plus years ago. But now, any of you Wharton MBA students here? Current?
Graduate.
You look familiar to me. I think Anyway, a long time ago. You don't
Failed
remember
him.
me, so therefore I probably, anyway. No, young MBAs, undergrads are really interested in this topic now because they've seen the failures of their parents' generation in trying to live lives that are fruitfully enriched in the different parts of them, and they also have different attitudes and values about what matters in life. And so there are many initiatives. My course now, I had to beg students to take this class when I first started teaching it in 2001. It's way oversubscribed now. This MOOC, as I say, has 100,000 students enrolled worldwide. And it's business people and it's all kinds of other people. And I talk about this and lecture, do workshops in all kinds of companies. Every business leader that I run across is looking to establish a clear and true, authentic point of view about work and the rest of life, because they have to, because their people are saying, hey, I want to have meaningful work and a meaningful life, and so how are we going to make that work? So there's a lot of need and a lot of interest. I teach an undergraduate class on teams, and I start the class by asking students, all right, what's your dream job? And so we go around in a circle, there's 25 Wharton undergrads. And last year, I got to the third student, Nathan is sitting there, and he says, well, my dream job is to be a stay-at-home dad. I said, are you fucking kidding me? Sorry. I did say that because I was astounded. Can you imagine a Wharton sophomore saying that his dream job is to be a stay-at-home dad?
Well, what's more surprising there is not that he thought it; it's that he said it out loud.
Yeah,
right?
and he was applauded.
Something 60% of guys want to be a stay-at-home dad, but the majority of us feel like society would look down upon.
The norms and values and expectations of young people have changed radically. Last year, I published a book called Baby Bust: New Choices for Men and Women in Work and Family. And this was the result of a study comparing the class of 1992 when they graduated. So we surveyed the class of 1992 undergrads when they graduated. It wasn't your class, was it?
Well, I graduated in 92, but I was an MBA.
Okay. With the class of 2012. So a true cross-generational study. It's not like asking 45-year-olds and 25-year-olds, what do you think today? Because if you do that, what you find out is what 45-year-olds think about life and what 25-year-olds think about life. So this is a comparison of 22-year-olds in 1992 with 22-year-olds in 2012. And one of the questions we asked was, do you plan to have or adopt children? Yes, probably, not sure, probably not, and no were the response alternatives. And in 92, 78% said yes, men and women. And in 2012, only 42% said yes, men and women. So the book explores what happened and why, and it's different for men and for women. But for men, it has much to do with, I don't see how I can afford this, because, so if you worked during college or if you had loans, you were much less likely to plan to have kids of your own as a man because you felt still the financial obligation. So that was going to deter your interest. People still want to have children, like the desire is still there. That's gone down only a smidgen. Is being a parent part of a rich and meaningful life? Yes, I mean, 86% both years. But the planning for actually having them is much lower now because people are expecting to have spouses who are full-time employed. They have no support for childcare, so how the heck am I going to do this? I could go on about that, but well, let me just pause right there then.
So you talked earlier about sort of students wanting to receive this, and all of us sort of want to make this part of our ethos, want to crack this nut of work and life and community and self. Is that something that we should be integrating into our schools? Is that something that we can teach our kids at home? If you have a 9-month-old or if you have a 21-year-old, are there things that we can do so our kids don't grow up as split as us and needing to repair ourselves?
I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. And maybe we can talk about this now or soon in the Q&A. One of the really important findings that we've been doing research on what happens when people look at what matters most to them, which is the first part of the work that I ask people to do in my classes. Write your vision of the kind of leader you want to become, or 15 years from now, what are you doing? What's the day in the life look like? What's the impact that you're having? Talk about the 3 or 4 critical episodes in your life history and how those shaped your values and beliefs. What do you care about? So it starts with that. And getting people to talk about that, share that with colleagues is profoundly important, and most people don't do it hardly enough. And then, who are the most important people in your life? And actually naming them and writing about why they matter to you, to your future. And what are your mutual expectations? And then looking at the set of, say, the dozen most important people in your whole life, at work, at home, and in the community, and looking at that as a system of interdependent expectations. So how is what your parents expect of you, how does that relate to what your colleagues and friends and children expect of you and what you expect of yourself? So you look at that as a whole and you start to see ideas for, well, what could I do that would benefit both my parents and my clients and my students and my friends? You start to think from the perspective of all the different parts of life, and then you design experiments over the course of a month or so. What could you try that would actually create value in the different parts of your life? And I have found that everyone on earth can do this. And it's a very powerful thing to try it, to be the scientist in the laboratory of your life, because what you see then over the course of a month is what works, what doesn't, and what other ideas you have for innovation that enables you to truly be the leader in the different parts of your life. And this is something that high school kids can certainly learn. So I have some students who are working with high school kids, teaching them this basic model, and they eat it up. Because everybody wants to be clearer about what matters most to them and to be asked about that, to be honored for that. It's useful to start to think about, well, who matters most to me in the different parts of my life, and what choices am I going to make about how to integrate the different parts in a way that works for all of them. How we bring this down to the level of elementary schools and before is something that you folks probably know a lot more about than I do, and I'd love to hear more about this kind of education, which really is about the spiritual life.
Sure.
What does it mean to have a meaningful life is the question that this ultimately boils down to. And even in the introduction, Matt, you said that this is not something we typically talk about at the Wharton School of Finance. It's true, but we are now. We are now, and we're not the only school that's doing it. And businesses around the world are doing this because it brings value to the bottom line. What we find in our research is that when you ask people to focus on what matters to them, to figure out who matters to them, to then make changes in where they invest their attention so that they're better aligned with what they actually care about, they spend a little less of their attention on work, more on the other parts of their lives, their families, their communities, and their private selves, their mind, body, and spirit, and they not only feel better in all the different domains, but they actually perform better in all the different domains, the work, home, community, and self, according to the ratings of people around them, even at work. So I'll end with this, just to underscore it. They're focusing less attention on work, and they're performing better at work.
Sure.
Now, why is that? It's paradoxical, and my economist friends look at me like, huh? That doesn't fit our model. Less attention to work brings greater performance at work. How could that be? You're shaking your head, so you must have some idea about why that would be.
I would guess that I feel like I'm most productive and in general in all domains when I have balance and I'm not, I guess you could burn out if you work too hard.
Yeah, so you bring more energy.
Isn't it a matter of confidence? I mean, if you feel better in your home life and your relationship with your friends and everybody in the outside world, then you have more confidence. And more confident.
So is it a matter of confidence? Absolutely. You feel better about yourself, and that spills over. The term of art and psychological science is positive spillover from one domain to another. So yeah, your enhanced sense of confidence spills over, and that affects your performance at work. Other reasons?
Do you want to just repeat the question for everybody again?
So why is it that spending less attention to work and devoting more to the other parts of your life that matter most to you and to them? Because you've discovered that by talking with them. Not only do you look at who matters most and think about the mutual expectations you have with them, but you also, forgot to mention this, prepare for and undertake conversations with each one of them, which many students abhor, and clients and companies think, oh gosh, I've got to talk to now the 12 most important people in my life about our mutual expectations. I don't really want to do that. No, that's not a good idea. Because I'm afraid that what I'm going to hear is that they expect more of me than I'm currently able to deliver, when in fact what almost always happens, 80% of the time, is that what you discover when you ask people, here's what I think you expect of me, is this accurate? What you find is that they expect a little bit less and a little bit different than what you thought they expected. And yet most people go into those conversations thinking that what they're going to discover is that what other people want is more, so they're afraid to have the conversation because they're thinking, oh, more stress. They actually leave with less stress and they're smarter about what other people actually expect, which enables them to come up with experiments that are good for them and for you. And so when you do that, you're investing your attention more intelligently. You're not wasting effort. You're less distracted. You feel more confident and more whole. And those things result in better performance, even with less attention to work. It's working smarter.
So taking this from sort of the theoretical, I'd love to sort of hear some examples. We started our introduction was The Other F Word, which if you guys have not seen The Other F Word, that movie about punk rockers becoming dads, it's brilliant. And actually, with Fatherly, we've had the opportunity to talk to all sorts of incredible people about their journey into fatherhood, from C.J. Ramone of the Ramones to Tata, who's Jay-Z's right hand and runs Rock Nation, to Arnie Duncan, and talking to him about parent-teacher conferences and what it's like to be the Secretary of Education. So
what's the big idea that's come out of that work?
I think what's been really interesting is, well, for each of them, looking at how they are applying whatever they are doing into their own parenting. And I think sort of it was echoed a little bit in The Other F Word, and what we heard from C.J. Ramone was, I want my daughter to grow up as independent and free-spirited and carry all that we did in the Ramones into her own life. And you kind of see that across the board of dads utilizing the thing that they know and the thing that they've grown up doing and are super passionate about, and applying that to their own fatherhood. I wanted to talk a little bit specifically in your most recent book. You give, I think, 6 or 7 different examples of people who are doing a pretty good job at finding integration and balance and balance is a bullshit word. Integration.
I will not give up in my quest to eliminate that language from the discourse, but yes, thank you.
If you could give us a couple of examples of people that we know or that we don't know that you feel like have found a good point of.
So what I just described is a 4-month course, and it's a lot of work, and people who are able to invest in that kind of work, or they get a lot out of it, and it changes how they think about what's possible. But a lot of people say to me, is there something a little smaller? Because this is so big, it takes so much time. And by the way, what about like in the real world, Stu, instead of in this like stupid course that you're teaching? If you're going to be really successful, really successful, don't you have to give everything else up? Come on. That's what I got and continue to get, for the last 15 years. Because all the people I know who are really successful have given up everything. And that's just frankly not true. I've seen way too many examples. Indeed, for the last 15 years, I've been asking my students, come up with somebody who you know in your life or who you admire, and write about them from the point of view of these 3 principles and describe how they've become successful. Being real, being whole, being innovative. And there's hundreds of them from around the world, just from my students and my own experience, and you think about it yourself. Yes, of course you've got to make sacrifices, but that doesn't mean that you need to give up your community, your family, your personal mind, body,
and spirit. So give us an example.
So I went out and I'm going to write about a half a dozen people that people could hopefully relate to and learn from, and see how they've become successful, not by forsaking the other parts of their lives, but by embracing them. So Tom Tierney is one. He was the CEO of Bain & Company, the big consulting firm, who in his mid-40s quit that to start Bridgespan, which some of you may know, as a kind of nonprofit version, serving the nonprofit, the social sector, and using a lot of the principles that he had learned about in running Bain. But his story is so remarkable for the discipline that he showed throughout his life in reflecting on what mattered most to him through a journal, through conversations with trusted advisors, and through the commitments he made in, he was an engineer, so very assiduously, like really carefully tracking his time, and had rules, like there are X number of days that I've allotted to out-of-town travel per year, and I'm not going to exceed those. And I'm going to be really careful about how I choose, where I'm going to spend my time, and how he was able to shepherd both of his sons to become Eagle Scouts, and how he has still great relationships with them while being CEO of a major consulting firm, which is a highly demanding, service-oriented organization. So his example is a profoundly inspiring one. And what comes through as you read about his early years, you see that what he was writing about when he was a young man was, I want to create a company that's going to have a positive impact on the world, which is the signal feature of my current MBA students. They want to have a positive impact on the world. Yes, even Wharton students. It's true. I'm telling you, there's good news here in the greening of the MBA. So Tom, early on, was writing about this Make a Difference company. And he started talking about that, getting ideas about it. And 15 years later, when he's CEO of Bain, and he announces to his partners, I'm leaving to start, with 3 other guys, to start a small, non-for-profit. They sat him down and said, Tom, did you just get bad news from the doctor? I mean, is everything okay? Like, what's your problem? Like, they thought that something was seriously wrong with him. But no, something was seriously right with him, and it was cultivated through years of reflection and thinking about what really matters to me and how am I going to figure out how to make that work. So that's one example. There are others, but
It's awesome.
yeah, some you will know about. So Sheryl Sandberg's in there, and
Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama's in there. Bruce Springsteen. Springsteen fans? Anyone? No.
Right here.
Okay. Bruce he's the real thing. So, and his story was just so much fun to write about. Eric Greitens, you probably don't know. He is a former humanitarian, Oxford-educated humanitarian who then became a Navy SEAL. And then when he finished his service in Iraq and Afghanistan, founded the Mission Continues, which helps people wounded veterans to heal by serving at home. And Julie Foudy is the other person, the soccer champion, who is in the book not just because of her efforts on the field, but because of how she has learned how to advocate for young girls through what she learned as both a mother as well as someone who faced discrimination as a woman playing soccer.
So I went on, speaking of Eric, I went on your site and I took your quiz to find out sort of where I thought I was failing, and I realized I was maybe I was failing. I got a 65 out of 85, so that's maybe just above where I'd like to be. But I realized all of the things and all the character flaws at a very personal level that I want to work on, and I have 1 month to do it. So
You're doomed, Simon. Give up.
I know. All right. So for probably all of us in the room who struggle at some level, hopefully you guys are above a 65. What are some steps that we very practically that we can be taking?
Yeah. So what Simon's referring to, there are these 18 skills that I write about. So the 3 principles, you can look at them in terms of specific behavioral skills, and at qualtrics.com/total leadership, if you just search for leading the life you want, or go to the Total Leadership website, it takes 3 minutes, and you'll get a score on how you think you're doing on these 18 skills, which I know from 20 years of research are the skills that one needs to be leading the life you want. It has to do with knowing what's important to you, clarifying expectations with people who matter to you, being able to experiment intelligently with new ways of getting things done. These are the essential skills. And so I use these 6 cases to illustrate how these skills were developed by these remarkably successful people who became successful not by getting rid of the other parts of their lives, but by fully embracing who they were in their families, their communities, and their spiritual and emotional development. And so, what have they done? Well, the back half of the book is exercises that I've culled from the best modern research on how to develop these skills. So There's all kinds of things you can do. I think one fun thing that everybody here can do would be to imagine what's one thing I could do right now that I haven't ever done before that would have a positive impact on my work and my home and my community and myself personally. You just take a minute to think about that, and then we could actually do that right now and then do something along the lines with Michael. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk with my discussion mate. That was so wonderful to do that. Why don't we do something like that again? All right, so here's the thing. You must have enjoyed that conversation, right? Let's do something like that. And women in the room, you can participate in this, okay? And you can talk to whoever you want. So here's the thing. Here's my challenge to you. See if we can do this. Think about something that you haven't done before that you believe would have a positive impact, not just on your work, but would also indirectly or directly have a positive effect on your family and your community, however you define family, however you define community. That could be your friends, neighbors, community organizations, anything beyond the circle of your work and your family. And yourself personally, your mind, body, and spirit. What could you do right now that you haven't done before that is really, really teeny tiny? Like maybe it's just taking 15 minutes to not do anything other than talk to your daughter when she comes to you. Or maybe it's shifting where and when you get things done. Maybe it's delegating something that you're currently doing that somebody else could benefit from doing. Maybe it's taking care of yourself. The most popular type of experiment is the rejuvenating and restoring type of experiment, and that is taking care of yourself through diet, exercise, reading. When we did this program with the National Football League, we have a program at Wharton with the NFL, a lot of the guys took as their experiments just to read. I'm not making that up. And how that was going to affect their performance on the field. They had a way of thinking about, maybe not immediately, but over the long term, how that was going to affect who they were as players, as well as fathers, as well as community leaders. So, are you willing to try having just a moment to think about, well, what action could you take that might produce what I call a four-way win, and then talking to a single neighbor about your idea for what you might try and get some reaction to that? The whole thing will take 5 minutes.
Great.
I think you'll find this enjoyable and get some practical value from what it is that we're doing here. So let's do that. Find a neighbor and talk over what's the thing that you could try that would produce a potential four-way win, and then give some feedback or advice to your discussion partner.
Okay.
Who came up with a good idea? Greg.
We were talking about something that I'm taking to another level. I mean, I'm self-admitted, had a total 24/7 cell phone addiction. I've been an executive for 14 years, and about 2 years ago, I had my daughters on Labor Day. There was a problem. They designed cell phone boxes. They took two sneaker boxes, and they both, they're 10 and 7 now, and they decorated them. And when I get home now from work, the phone goes in the box until they're in bed.
Wow, that's fabulous.
Cool.
That is fantastic.
Good practice.
It's like 85. I mean, we're like at an 85 or 90%, technology-free zone during that time. And my wife and I, we're just talking about it because there's no rules written, for this technology. And
So-
I understand the benefits of it, but we're constantly trying to figure out how to somewhat go counter-tech.
The big idea here, and let me just jump in here because I know we're constrained on time, for all these different kinds of experiments that you might try is to ask the question that I was sort of addressing earlier, and that is, how does your doing that benefit your business life? Of course you can. Well, go ahead, briefly.
You actually achieve separation.
And how does that help you in your business life?
It sharpens your senses when you go back to it.
Exactly, yes. So if you think about it, these investments, let's call them, of your attention to the people who matter most to you as adding value to your business life. Now, it may not always work that way because you can't be in two places at once, and sometimes there is real conflict. I mean, of course. but to think in terms of the question that I just asked. I think over the 30 years, this is my biggest contribution. It's to ask the question, how by taking care of yourself, your family, your community, are you creating value for your business? And just like you, Craig, I've never met anyone who couldn't answer that question when it was about doing something that really mattered to them. Because you become more confident, more coherent as a person, and better able to bring value to whatever it is that you do with your work. So by answering that question, you overcome the guilt and the fear that's often associated with trying something new that is intended to benefit your non-work life. Because you're doing it here not just for you, you're doing it to help your family, your community, but you're also doing it to help your business life. And you expect that will happen. And if it doesn't happen, well, then you make an adjustment so that it perhaps does. But to bring into your consciousness how what you're doing is helpful to your work when you invest in the other parts of your life, that's a really, really important question. And there's one thing I would leave you with, that's it.
So let's stop there. I know this is a huge conversation. We're going to have lunch, and there'll be opportunities both to talk to Stu and myself, and also just talk amongst yourself on best practices. So thanks, Stu.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Simon. Thank you.